Have you ever seen someone do the same strange thing every single day? Imagine a man who walks into the same coffee shop every morning, sits at the same table by the window, looks quietly at the front door, and then leaves without ordering a single drink. It sounds strange, doesn't it? Today, you're going to discover why he does it. While you enjoy this story, your English will improve naturally. Don't worry if you don't understand every word. Just relax, listen carefully, and enjoy the journey. Every story you finish will help you become a more confident English speaker. Now, let's begin. On a quiet street in a small town, there was a cozy coffee shop called Morning Light. It wasn't the biggest cafe in town, and it certainly wasn't the most expensive. People loved it because it felt warm, peaceful, and friendly. Fresh coffee filled the air every morning. Soft music played gently in the background, and sunlight came through the large front windows. Some customers stopped by before work, while others came to read a book, answer emails, or simply enjoy a few peaceful moments before a busy day began. Emma had worked there for almost 2 years. She was 24 years old, cheerful, and kind. She enjoyed talking with customers and remembered almost everyone's favorite drink. Every morning, she greeted people with the same warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Taylor. One black coffee?" she asked. Mr. Taylor laughed and nodded. "You always remember." Emma smiled proudly. "Of course, that's part of my job." The cafe felt like a second home, where everyone knew each other, and every day seemed calm and familiar. But one customer was different from everyone else. Every morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, a man quietly opened the front door and walked inside. He always wore a simple blue shirt, carried an old brown leather bag, and chose the table beside the window. He never looked around the room. He never spoke to anyone. Instead, he quietly sat down, placed his bag beside his chair, and looked at the entrance as if he were waiting for someone very important. Then, after about an hour, he stood up and left without ordering coffee, tea, or even a glass of water. At first, Emma thought it was only a coincidence. Maybe he was waiting for a friend. But the same thing happened the next day, and the day after that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, nothing ever changed. He always arrived at exactly the same time, sat in exactly the same chair, watched the door with the same quiet expression, and left without saying a word. Little by little, Emma became more curious. Who was this man? Who was he waiting for? And why did he keep coming back every single morning? For almost 3 weeks, Emma watched the mysterious man every morning. She tried to focus on her work, but every time she looked toward the window, he was still there, sitting quietly and watching the door. He never looked bored. He never checked his phone. He simply waited. Sometimes he smiled softly when the door opened, but a second later, the smile disappeared. It happened again and again, and Emma couldn't stop wondering who he hoped to see. One rainy Tuesday morning, the coffee shop was almost empty. The rain fell gently against the windows, and the soft music inside made the cafe feel even quieter than usual. Emma looked at the man for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and finally walked over to his table. "Excuse me," she said with a friendly smile. "May I ask you something?" The man looked up and smiled politely. "Of course." "I've seen you here every morning for weeks, Emma said. "You always sit at this table, but you never order anything. I'm just curious. Are you waiting for someone?" The man looked toward the front door again. For a few seconds, he didn't answer. Then he looked back at Emma. "Yes," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for someone for many years." Emma expected him to laugh or say it was a joke, but he didn't. His eyes were calm, yet there was a sadness behind them that was impossible to hide. "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. "I didn't mean to ask something too personal." "It's all right," the man replied. "Most people never ask. They simply look at me and wonder." Emma hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "If you don't mind, who are you waiting for?" The man smiled, but this time the smile was full of memories. "My daughter." Emma felt surprised. "Does she know you're here?" He slowly shook his head. "I don't think so." The man introduced himself as Daniel. His voice was gentle, and he spoke slowly, choosing every word with care. "Many years ago," Daniel began, "my daughter and I used to come here every Saturday morning. She loved this coffee shop, even though she was too young to drink coffee. She always ordered hot chocolate with extra whipped cream." Daniel smiled as he remembered those happy mornings. "She would sit right there," he said, pointing to the chair across from him. "She always looked out the window and waved at everyone who walked by." Emma smiled as she imagined the little girl. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked down at his hands. "My wife and I divorced when Lily was 12. She moved to another city with her mother. At first, we talked every week, then every month. Then, one day, the phone stopped ringing. The cafe became completely silent. I wrote letters," Daniel continued. "I sent birthday cards. I even moved closer to this town because I heard she might come back someday. But I never knew where she lived." Emma felt her heart grow heavy. "Then why do you come here every day?" she asked. Daniel reached into his old leather bag and carefully removed a small, folded piece of paper. "I received this letter almost 6 months ago." Emma unfolded it carefully. Only one sentence was written. "Dad, if life ever gives us another chance, I'll meet you at Morning Light Cafe." There was no date, no address, no phone number, no signature, only that single sentence. Daniel looked toward the door once again. "So I decided to believe she would come. Every morning, at 8 o'clock, no matter what." Emma looked at the letter one more time. Then something caught her attention. There was a tiny mark in the corner of the paper, a mark she had seen somewhere before. She suddenly realized the answer might be much closer than Daniel had ever imagined. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the letter. The small mark in the corner looked familiar. Later that evening, after her shift ended, she opened her laptop and searched for the symbol. After a few minutes, she finally found it. It belonged to a local art studio called Blue Sky Studio, a place where young artists met every weekend. Emma remembered that one of her regular customers often talked about teaching painting classes there. She decided to visit the studio the next morning before work. The studio was bright and full of colorful paintings. Children laughed as they mixed paints, while adults quietly worked on beautiful landscapes and portraits. Emma showed the letter to the owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes. The woman looked at the paper for a long moment before smiling softly. "I know this mark," she said. "One of our artists always uses it. Her name is Lily." Emma's heart began to race. "Does she still work here?" she asked. The woman nodded. "She teaches on Saturdays. She'll be here in about 30 minutes. Emma sat quietly and waited. Every minute felt longer than the last. Finally, the front door opened and a young woman walked inside, carrying a large canvas. She smiled politely at everyone before placing her bag on a table. "Lily?" Emma asked carefully. The young woman turned around. "Yes?" Emma suddenly felt nervous. She didn't know how to begin. "I work at Morning Light Cafe," she said. "I think I know someone who has been waiting for you." The smile slowly disappeared from Lily's face. She didn't ask who. She already knew. Her eyes filled with tears. "My father," she whispered. Emma nodded gently. "He comes every morning." Lily closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, tears were running down her cheeks. "I've wanted to see him for years," she said quietly. "But every time I tried, I became afraid." "Afraid of what?" Emma asked. "Afraid that he wouldn't forgive me. Or worse, that he had already forgotten me." Emma shook her head with a gentle smile. "He has never forgotten you, not even for a single day." Lily looked out the window and took a deep breath. "Then, tomorrow morning, I'll finally go." The next morning felt different. The coffee shop was peaceful as always, but Emma couldn't stop looking at the clock. At exactly 8 o'clock, Daniel walked through the front door. He smiled politely, walked to his usual table, and looked toward the entrance. Everything happened exactly as it had happened every morning for years. 8:10, 8:20, 8:30. Daniel quietly looked down at his watch. He smiled sadly, as if telling himself that tomorrow might be another chance. Then, the bell above the front door rang. A young woman stepped inside. She stood still for a moment, looking around the cafe. Daniel slowly lifted his head. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. For a few seconds, the whole coffee shop seemed completely silent. Then, Lily whispered one simple word. "Dad." Daniel stood up so quickly that his chair almost fell over. He walked toward her with tears in his eyes. "Lily." Before he could say another word, she ran into his arms. They hugged each other tightly, both crying and smiling at the same time. "I'm so sorry," Lily said through her tears. "I should have come back much sooner." Daniel gently shook his head. "It doesn't matter," he said softly. "You're here now." Emma quietly turned away to give them some privacy. Around the cafe, several customers smiled without saying a word. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. For the first time in many years, Daniel didn't spend the morning looking at the front door. Instead, he spent it talking with his daughter over 2 cups of hot chocolate. Not coffee, because hot chocolate had always been Lily's favorite. Sometimes life gives us a second chance. Sometimes love waits patiently. And sometimes the longest journey is simply finding the courage to come home. Vocabulary review. Let's review a few useful words from today's story. Cozy, comfortable and warm. Peaceful, calm and quiet. Wait, to stay until someone or something arrives. Promise, words that say you will do something. Forgive, to stop feeling angry about something. Tears, drops of water that come from your eyes when you cry. Courage, the strength to do something difficult. Second chance, another opportunity to do something. Thank you for listening to today's story. Remember, you don't need to understand every single word to improve your English. The most important thing is to listen regularly and enjoy the journey. If you liked this story, come back for the next episode. Every new story will help you build your vocabulary, improve your listening skills, and become more confident in English. See you next time.